All right, looks like got a number of people logged in, so I'll go ahead and get started. Again, hello everybody, this is Rick Wilson with Martin & Associates. Hope everybody is staying safe and healthy out there. Thanks for taking the time out today to join our webinar, Sage 100 Manufacturing 101. And that's going to be presented by Joe Gubser and Brett Penzinger here at Martin & Associates. And we'll be learning about the new production management module and the suite of modules called operations management and a whole lot more. But before we get started, and I hand it over to Brett and Joe, a few housekeeping items. We're going to be recording this today, so we'll be able to send that out with some follow-up emails. We'll be able to reference that later. And as far as if you have any questions, just go ahead and use the Zoom chat feature. And we'll be monitoring that, but we'll take care of those mainly at the end. So we'll take care of those. So Joe, I think you're starting, so go ahead and take it away. It's all yours.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. As Rick said, this is Joe Gubser. What I'm going to, so we're going to go over through what we call Sage 100 Manufacturing 101. And then what we're going to kind of cover in this webinar today is we're going to do an overview of the Sage 100 production management module and talk about what that is used for and kind of go through some of the features of that. We're going to do an overview and discussion of the Sage 100 operations management module and talk about that in more detail. We are going to do an overview of the inventory requirements planning module as well, and talk about what that replaces and what that will do for you. And then we're going to review some of the key differences between the production management module and the operations management module, and when you would use one versus the other and what some of the differences are between them. And then we're going to wrap up today with question and answer at the end. As Rick mentioned, just send your questions in through Zoom and we will get those answered at the end of class. So that's kind of what we're intending to cover here today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and jump into the production management module a little bit. So in a nutshell, what the Sage 100 production management module is it is Sage's replacement for the old Sage 100 work order module. So what Sage has done with their product is they, over time, moved all their modules into what they call the new business framework. And we'll get into a little more detail here in a little bit about what it means to be in the business framework. But a few of the modules that were kind of left behind that did not come over into the new business framework was the work order module and the MRP module. So those were kind of left behind in the old framework, and there were some limitations to that. So this is kind of the rework of the work order module. And Brett will touch briefly here a little bit of what the rework of the MRP module is. So production management, while it's a replacement of the work order module, it does more than just simply bringing the work order module into the new business framework. There's also a number of new features and capabilities that have gotten added to the product as well. So what does it mean to be in the new business framework? So one of the key things is it means that it is compatible with the Sage 100 Premium or sequel version of the Sage 100 product. If a module is not in the new business framework, you cannot run the sequel version. So that's a limitation for people who have been on the work order module up to now. They haven't had the ability to run the sequel version. There are what are called primary and secondary grids in the data entry system. So if anybody uses the modules like work order, sales order, purchase order, how sales order entry and invoice data entry and all that are a grid entry interface, and you can move along the primary grid and you have the secondary grid down bottom. Work order / production management now has that. You have the ability to size your windows and make them bigger or smaller, and it will remember that. The ability to do UDFs and UDTs, and the ability to create custom scripting for any table or screen in the system. All reports in the production management module are now crystal reports. There are no longer any program reports in the module. And that comes into play where if you have a report that does the majority of what you want it to do, but we want to tweak it a little bit to add some additional data to it, we have the ability of doing that using crystal reports to add that additional data. All the data entry spots inside of the production management module are batch entry as well, and that's one of the features of the new business framework. A couple more things here in the new business framework. Right-click context menus in the grids. So that means when you're in any of the grid entry screens, you have the ability to right-click, and there's some additional functionality behind that right-click. Also, when you're in any of the grids, you have the ability to right-click and export out to Excel. There's a feature inside of Sage called Business Insights Explorer. Work Order did not have any Business Insights Explorer views. As part of moving over to the production management module, there are now production management Business Insights Explorer or BIE views available. Visual Integrator imports will now be validated using the business framework logic. So that leverages off of that to do some validation if you're importing anything into the production management module through Visual Integrator. Okay, moving along here. So let's talk about some of the production management features. There is the ability to do dynamic inventory and dynamic labor. And I'm not going to spend any time on that right now. I have a couple slides here later on. In a few minutes, we'll go over that. Kind of goes into a little more depth of what those two mean. But those are two really nice features of production management that Work Order did not allow. Custom field labels that you can set up and use throughout the application. So, for instance, when you're in what's called a work ticket now, as opposed to a work order, if you don't want it to be called a work ticket number, you still want it to be called a work order number. There are certain fields where you can create what the labels for those fields are in the setup options, and then all the screens going forward will use that where that field is at. So any place where it said work ticket number, it would say work order number in that example. You have the ability to create new work orders from multiple sources. You can create them from a template, which Brett's going to spend a little bit more time on that during his part of the class when he gets into the operations management part, because it works similar between the two. You can copy it from another open work order / work ticket that is out there. You can copy it from a historical work order or work ticket that's out there, or you can manually just create it on your own by just saying next available number, and you start typing the information in and you put everything in by hand. When you create these work orders, it allows you to have complete visibility of how the work order was created when you go back and look at it later, so you would know. Okay. Work ticket steps and materials are fully editable all the way up until the time that the work ticket is closed. So you have the ability to go back and edit all that stuff until you close the work ticket. You have the ability to maintain original revised budgets for labor, materials, and other direct costs. You can easily move material from one step to another step number as well. Material costing estimates can be based on either last cost, standard cost, or the average cost of an item. You have the ability to use revision numbers on work order templates. So as you make changes, they can be saved as revisions out there. And you can track those revisions. You can create custom status codes. And I just noticed I have a typo here. I apologize. And it should say, and assign statuses to individual steps. So I'll make that change before we publish this out. But so you can create custom status codes, and you can assign those statuses to individual steps, which is something that you could not do in work order. You have the ability for any purchase order that you need to complete, that you need to create for any outside processing, like subcontractor or whatnot. You have the ability of doing a one-click purchase order from inside of the production management work ticket feature to create that purchase order out there. If you have the ability to attach the path or directory of related documents directly to a template. So if there are certain documents that you want to be attached to a work order, when you create a work order off a template, you could have that path to those documents as part of the template, and when it copied over, that would come over. You can scale your labor and your material by either by production run or by quantity per parent. So there's some scaling you can do in there to fine tune some things. Some of the other difference between work order, for instance, the work order number in the old work order module was a length of 7. The work ticket number, or what's the work order number inside of production management, goes to 12. So you have more, more availability to create numbering at that point. Your step numbers go from 4 in the work order module to 6 in production management. You have the ability to track deleted work orders, steps, and materials. So if you delete work orders / tickets and you delete steps off of a ticket, or you delete materials off a ticket, depending on how you have your setup set up, it can track all that for you in some audit logs out there. There's a totals tab that provides an overall snapshot of budget versus actual costs within a work ticket. This information can be viewed either by step or for the entire work order. So you can look and see how each individual step is coming along, budget versus actual, or you can look at the overall work order and see how the overall work order is coming along as well. You can also run a report that will print this information as well. So you can look at it on the totals tab of the work ticket / work order, or you can actually run report to see the information. There are extended text fields that are available to put work instructions in as part of setting up the work ticket. There are simplified screens for data review of status changes, material, direct labor, labor, direct costs, which are costs coming from accounts payable, purchase orders, and completions. And you have the ability that you can filter these by step or view for the entire work order. You have the ability of importing in material from a bill of material or a template during the work order creation or during the editing process. Direct import of material from a flat file into a work order can be done by clicking on a button within the work order or the work ticket. So if there's a certain layout you can have for a file, but if you have that set up, you can right click and bring that information right in from that file. You have the ability to track steps as change order steps, rework steps, or as memos. So as you're creating these steps that are attached to a work ticket, there's different types of steps that you can have. This is kind of a key thing here to save some time when you're creating a work order / work ticket inside of production management. In work order, you had to process a transaction called a release transaction that would release that work order and then let it be able to start work being done on it. That is no longer the case in production management. You can simply change a work ticket to released by changing the status to released, and it's going to ask you, in order to make this change, you got to save it, and once you say yes, it releases that work ticket, and the status will go to release, and it's grayed out, and you cannot change it back. So it's all done. Just do a drop-down menu now. You have the ability to individually assign serial numbers to completed items. So you can tell at every item that's completed, that might be a serialized item, what the serial number is for each of those. This replaces the old feature of only assigning the serial number to the first serialized item, and then the system would then calculate the remaining serial numbers from there based on how it was set up. You can now tell it for each item what the serial number is. This is another nice feature. You have the ability to post what are called direct costs directly from the accounts payable module out to a work ticket. So if you have AP invoices coming in, not assigned to a purchase order at all, you can enter that information into an AP invoice data entry, pick the appropriate information for the work ticket on the line, and it can have that information, those costs flow out to the work ticket. So unlike work order, production management, it does not require the use of bill of materials. However, you can use the bill of material module if you so desire. Some stuff with payroll with the employees. If you have the payroll module set up and integrated, it has the ability to use the employees that you already have set up in the payroll module. If you do not have the payroll module or you don't have it integrated, there is a place inside of production management where you can enter in the employees that will be doing work and doing clocking in and clocking out and labor transactions and whatnot. You can assign regular earnings codes and overtime earnings codes to shop employees, and this is whether or not you have the payroll module and it's integrated or not. You can estimate your labor hours and track these hours by step. And there is a new report that's been added called an employee productivity report that you can run to look and analyze, how productive your employees are working on your work tickets. So 2 things that I want to spend a little bit of time on here is what is called dynamic inventory is one, and we're going to talk about dynamic labor here a little bit as well. So dynamic inventory is the real-time updating of inventory transactions and quantity on hand as materials are used on a work order or issued to a work order. So in the way work order works now, you have to basically process a transaction where you assign or you issue the inventory to a work order. That is not reflected in inventory until you run the appropriate register and work order and post and update that. This is an optional feature called dynamic inventory, and if you choose to turn that on, then when you issue items to a work order, that immediately is reflected in the quantity on hand in the inventory modules, and it makes that inventory not be available. Okay? The dynamic inventory transaction, however, cannot take an inventory quantity to a negative number. All right, so a little bit more about this. When you're using dynamic inventory, like I said, it'll automatically create and reduce the inventory out there, I should say. And what it does, there is a transaction that gets created out in what's called the daily materials usage log, and it just sits out there. And then when you're ready to do the update to the general ledger, because when it issues the inventory out of the items out of inventory, there's no effect on general ledger at that time. You run what is called the daily material usage register, and that's where when you run the update of that, that's when it moves and updates the general ledger accordingly. Okay? If the material is recorded through transaction entry, so if you're in inventory management running transaction entry and you process it as a material type, it will not display an inventory maintenance or inventory inquiry until you run the transaction register and that is printed and updated, because that's not coming from directly inside of the production management there. So that's still the way it was in the past. So with the dynamic inventory, the dynamic inventory transactions are only available for Sage 100 users that are on Sage 100 Cloud subscription. If you're a perpetual maintenance end user, you do not have this functionality available. So that gets down to the type of maintenance that you have. Okay. One more thing I want to kind of talk about here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Brett here in a few minutes to let him start kind of going through into operations management, is I want to talk about dynamic labor. So very similar to dynamic inventory, what dynamic labor can be used for is that's where you can have labor be instantly recorded against work tickets as soon as the accept button is selected and to complete a labor transaction. So you're putting a labor transaction in to work against a work ticket in production management. You click on the accept button and that labor will basically record at that time. For labor to be posted dynamically to a work ticket, there is a setup option out in the production management options that has to be turned on to make that feature be available. If you don't have that turned on, then the dynamic labor will not work. Because just like dynamic inventory, dynamic labor is optional as well. Dynamic labor transactions can be recalled and can be edited all the way up until the labor register is printed and updated. Once the labor register is updated, the transactions can no longer be edited. So you put an entry out there, You click labor entry out there, you click the accept button, labor shows up right away. You realize, I need to make a change to that. Wrong number of hours, wrong rate, whatever. You can recall that, edit it, accept it again, and it'll put the update out there. You can do that all the way up until you run the register and you update it. Shop floor users. Our shop floor uses the dynamic labor functionality to reflect labor transactions that are created on remote devices. So if you're using the shop floor functionality and you're using remote devices for people to clock in, clock out, and things of that nature, it uses dynamic labor to record those. And then since it's using dynamic labor, you can then edit this information within labor entry if they were incorrectly created. So if somebody uses the handheld, clocks in, clocks out, the data's wrong, you notice it before you run the register, it's sitting out in labor entry, you can go out and edit that in labor entry before you update it. And it will show that change on the work ticket as well. If dynamic labor is used, the labor register / update will have it go out to general ledger, and that's when the GL effect of that happens. If dynamic labor is not being used, the labor register update posts the labor to the work ticket. Once the labor register is updated for both dynamic and non-dynamic labor transactions, it will create the daily transaction register, just like when you update your general ledger now. Just like dynamic inventory, dynamic labor is only available for Sage 100 Cloud subscription end users, and perpetual users do not have that functionality available to them. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Brett and let him kind of take over here. Okay, I stopped sharing. Brett, you should be able to take over now.
I will. And then Joe, you can see my screen, correct?
I can, yes. Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to transition over from production management over to operation management. So, what is operation management? How does it differ? Why are there two different options? So operation management you can think of as a more advanced version of production management. It is centered around what is considered a make-to-order process. The old work order process and production management are really centered around make to stock. You're always going into you can tie it, you can say it's connected to a sales order, but that's about all the connectivity that you have with both the old work order and the production management modules. Inside of operation management, it is really tightly tied to the actual sales order. It's also been around for quite a while. In just a second, I'm going to talk about sort of the name changes and what you might know operations management as. But since it's been around for a while, it's got some more advanced features, some more advanced add-ons, connectivity tools that production management just doesn't have or just doesn't have yet. Production management, just so you know, it is based off of operations management. And you might think, well, maybe I could use production management for my make to stock and operations management for my make to order. It doesn't quite work that way. It is sort of a, you have to pick which one you want to go with. And that's kind of why we're having this presentation today, is just so you can kind of understand the differences between the two and why you might go one over the other. Some brief history of operations management. You might know this product as job ops. You might have sat in on some job ops webinars, gotten some job ops marketing material over the years. It was its own separate third-party product in the Sage 100 world for years. A couple years ago, Scanco purchased that. Scanco, you might know them from, a lot of people probably either have seen the WO Scan product from Scanco, either you've seen it or you might even use it. So they maintain the WScan product. They also have a distribution scanning product. They also have a large multi-bin add-on for Sage 100. So a couple years ago, they purchased JobOps. They always have basically integrated with JobOps, just like they have a WOScan for scanning and doing the data entry tasks on a handheld device for work order. They had a product for JobOps called JOScan that did similar things. So Scanco now resells and maintains JobOps today. Once Scanco took over, the name of the product sort of was referred to as Sage 100 Manufacturing. And now with production management being another manufacturing module to ease some confusion, they went with production management, which is the replacement to work order, and operations management is what was Sage 100 Manufacturing, or more historically, JobOps. So some terminology is going to be sort of important, because I'm going to use a couple terms over and over and again, and this is sort of both what production management really wants to refer to things as and what operations management wants to refer to things as. So the first thing and the most important thing on this list is a work ticket. A work ticket, when I say work ticket, you're probably familiar with calling it a work order. It's the same thing. Secondly, there is something new in both production management and operation management. It's called a work ticket class. It's a classification of a work ticket. It's how you can control general ledger postings, how you can control defaulting, some of the things that Joe mentioned, the dynamic labor, the dynamic inventory, overhead rates, things like that, all get controlled by the work ticket class. That is something new that did not exist in the old work order module. One of the big things, and I'm going to spend some time on this, is what most people are familiar with, routings. That is called a work ticket template. It's not a one-to-one match. Work ticket templates are a little bit more robust. You can do quite a bit more with them. And likewise, routings, if you're familiar with them, routings contain steps, and you would assign operation codes to those steps. Work ticket templates have steps which consist of activity codes. So that's sort of the relationships. Work ticket templates replace routings, activity codes replace operation codes. And lastly, work order printing, most people refer to those as a traveler anyway, so that shouldn't be too confusing to think about. Some overview items. So what can you do in operations management with this work ticket? So again, when I say work ticket, I'm referring to a work order. So there's a couple different ways you can use the system. Primarily, you're going to use make to order. You can also do assemble to order. Additionally, there is an entire subset of operations management users that aren't even producing anything. They're more field service, repair, installation work. So they're not making anything. They're just using operations management to basically track the status of these install jobs, these repair jobs, and be able to apply the correct labor cost to the order itself. And finally, sometimes you need to make things, right? So even though it's primarily a make to order system, it still has some make to stock features as well. You have to go through the process a little bit differently, but you can still do make to stock work tickets. So some key differences between operations management and really production management and work order is this sort of everything being centered around make to order. What this means is a sales order is required for a work ticket. So every work ticket has to start with a sales order. And by that, I mean, you are literally in sales order data entry. So the sales order menu, main sales order data entry. And while you're creating the sales order, you are going to be presented with some buttons that you can make the work ticket straight from the sales order. And that's the primary way that you are going to create work tickets. So it is a much tighter integration between work ticket to sales order than you're going to see with either work order or production management. Make to stock. Even if you're doing make to stock work tickets, you are still going to be going through the sales order module. You've got to create a specific customer that flags in a certain way. When you create the sales order, you got to flag it in a certain way, and it processes through the system a little bit differently. You can kind of think of that like if you have a sales order and it's a make to stock sales order, you don't want it to kind of count on your quantity on sales order. So the system has to treat that sales order a little bit differently. And finally, just to sort of cement the fact of how tightly these things are integrated, your work ticket number is always prefixed with the sales order number. So whatever sales order you're on and what you're making from that sales order, that's always going to be your prefix for your work ticket number. So types of work tickets. This kind of goes back into this work ticket class functionality. And I'm going to go into each one of these here. You can either have a line-based, quantity-based, or an order-based work ticket. Line-based, I'm going to spend the most time talking about this one. This one is probably the one that is going to be most used in anyone that's going to be converting over from the work order. So what that is each parent produced item that is on a sales order is going to get its own unique work ticket number, again, prefixed with the sales order number, and the suffix is going to be its own unique number relating to that line item on the sales order, and you're going to be producing the same quantity on that work ticket that is on the sales order line. And I have some screenshots of that here in just a second. The next one is going to be what's considered a quantity-based work ticket. This is a little bit different. It takes a little bit, you got to wrap your head around this a little bit more. But so not only are you getting an individual unique work ticket for sales order per item, but you're also getting a unique work ticket by sales order, by item, by individual quantity. So if you have a sales order with a quantity to make or quantity to sell, i.e. quantity to make of 5, and you're making a work ticket out of that, you're going to get 5 unique trackable work tickets out of that. When you do this, there are some limitations. You kind of have to reconfigure your work ticket steps. You can really only have one operational step when you get to this level of detail with a quantity-based work ticket. Lastly, is an order-based, which means you're going to have a one-to-one relationship. So from a sales order, you're going to get only one work ticket, and that is generally used for either just assembly or more often than not, service work. So these are your field service users, your repair work, your installation, where you're only doing one job, so to speak, per order. So work ticket templates, Joe mentioned that in production management. I hit on this just a minute ago. This is probably the first place that you're going to see stark differences between how production management and how operations management does things versus work order is going to be in work ticket templates. And again, this production management and operation management share the same concept when we're talking about work ticket templates. Work ticket templates, again, this is what you're used to referring to as a routing. The difference here is if you're familiar with routings, the routings are really, you would go into routing maintenance, you would give it a routing number, and you would see all your steps listed in a detail section. You would then flip over to bill of materials, you would enter your bill there, and then you would say which step each item comes into play at, what step along the process of the routing are the items issued. Work ticket templates maintain things a little bit differently. It is because there's so much more data per step and so much more things that you can do per step, you're really maintaining it by template by step. And I'm going to just quickly jump to the screen below here. You can see my template number. I have to pick a template number and a step and then go into the maintenance of it. So like I said, it can work with bill of materials just like your old routings used to work. So you can have your templates, you can have all your steps, you could go into bill of materials, and you could say which step each item is issued on. If you are, another way that you could do it, or if you were going to be like a first time, like if you've never used the work order module before and you've never really done bill of materials before, more often than not, you're probably going to just use the work ticket template, because the work ticket template can either work with bill of materials or it can just flat out replace bill of materials. So what that can do is, if I switch back over to my screenshot here, you can see that my template number, I'm on, I'm making this CSIS 100 item. I'm on step 1, which is my first real official step. I could issue parts on this step here versus going over to bill of materials and tying the bill to the template that way. So this is just another way to do it. The system works fine either way. If you are going to only use work ticket templates, the work ticket template takes place of both the bill of material and the routing at the same time. So your work ticket template number really becomes your item number, just like your bill of material number is your item number. If you were only going to use work ticket templates, you're going to more navigate to that way. If you wanted to have shared routings and still use bill of materials, again, you can. The work ticket templates have this a little bit more robust scaling feature versus what you could do in the work order module. You have this concept of operations per parent, parent per operations. So if it's easier to track labor by thousands of parts being produced versus an individual part being used, or if you wanted to quickly rescale, the work ticket templates have that ability. And finally, one of the neat new features in both production management and operation management is per step, it has its own specific UDF system that is not like the UDFs elsewhere, if you're familiar with custom office and how those UDFs are used. So what this means is, because we're configuring these UDFs per basically work ticket class / step, you can get prompted with different, most often it's going to be used for quality control. So each type of work ticket you're working on can have its own quality control checks. So you don't potentially have to use the same set of features across every single item that you make. You can get those UDFs or those QC questions narrowed down to the item that you're making. Again, this is a screenshot of the work ticket template. So I've got my template number, I got my step, and here you can see I am assigning the items. You can see 6. I think there's 9 total, but you can see those 9 total items being assigned in step 10. Just so you know, and this works in both systems, there is always a step 000. There's no labor associated with it. There's no parts associated with that step. It's just sort of a starting step that always happens when you're using work ticket templates. The next big thing, and this is the other thing that I kind of wanted to relay, because this is unique to operations management. Work ticket templates are a shared feature between production management and operations management. This right here is where operations management does treat the system differently. If you were using production management, if you wanted to make a work ticket, it would feel and look very similar to how a work order would look. You would go to production management, you'd go to work ticket entry, you would hit next number, pick your item, type in your quantity. Very similar to how work order worked. Operations management doesn't work that way. You have to start with a sales order. So the process is, you create a sales order, you assign it this work ticket class, which tells it, is it a by order, is it by quantity, is it by item type of work order. And then on the lines tab, if you're doing like a by item, by line work ticket, you'd go to the lines, you would flag the line that it would be a work ticket line, and then it's going to prompt you, hey, you just click this, do you want to make a work ticket out of this item? And then you would say yes, and then it would pop up. So how that looks is, you can see on my screen, I'm on order 1723. That number is important because you're going to see that reflected in the work ticket number here in just a second. So I've got order number 1723. I'm assigning it this work ticket class, which is a new field when you're using operations management. That's tied to this make to order process. Then when I go to the lines tab, I have 2 lines that I'm making that I'm going to produce items for. The second one in particular I want to look at, it's the CSIS 100 item. I'm saying yes, I want to make a work ticket out of it. It assigns work ticket number 2. The first, it's always a number of, which one am I producing? And you can kind of think of that work ticket number as a work ticket suffix number, and you're going to see that in just a second. And I'm ordering 2, so I need to make 2. So what happens is then you're going to get this work ticket entry screen that pops up. My work ticket number 1723 from the sales order, and I'm on, the suffix is 002. If I toggle back, if I'm looking on line 2, I'm making a CSIS 100. My work ticket number is 002, and I'm on 1723-002. Here, I went to step 10. Step 10 is where the first official step is. That's where products and labor actually come into place. That's why you see on the screen above, it's pointing to 002-000. It's always pointing at the first sort of dummy step, the placeholder step. So here, the work ticket that I'm looking at the production of the second item, and I'm just on the first actual step. I think there's like 9 total steps. So it goes 10, 20, 30, all the way up to 90. You can see that I'm making a CSIS 100. My order quantity is 2, just like my sales order quantity is 2. So that is a stark difference between how work order or production management treats the creation of work tickets and how you interact with work tickets. There is an inquiry screen, so if you want to get to that without going through sales order, you certainly can. But typically what you would do is you would pull up the sales order, click on the line, and then over here, this highlighted looks like a wrench and a hammer. That is going to pop up the work ticket entry screen for you. So integrated modules and this is for both production management and operations management. Sales order is a given for operations management. Inventory is a given. Bill of materials is one that you can choose to either use or not use. Both systems are going to be able to interact with the purchase order module, so you can make on-the-fly purchase orders if you don't have quantity. You've got accounts payable features in both systems. Joe mentioned that the direct cost, same thing goes for both operations management and production management, and the same payroll integration between the two. Some other notable features are, again, this sort of direct inventory or auto issue of inventory. The one difference is production management actually does a little bit better job at direct labor than what operations management does. You still have some amount of automatic labor, but it's not quite as nice in operations management as it is in production management. The direct cost that I mentioned before. And then operations management has a baked in, it's called Component Exception Manager. This is basically the old MRP module that got replaced in production management. It's called IRP. And if you're using operations management, it's not a separate module, it's baked in. It's called Component Exception Manager. I'm going to jump into the IRP. They're very, very similar, both Component Exception Manager, which is operations management, and IRP, which is production management. They're very, very similar. They're almost identical. I'm going to jump over to IRP here for the last sort of 5 minutes, just so you can kind of see how that differs from the old MRP module. And then before I jump into that, some add-ons that you get with operations management. There are some advanced scheduling modules that you can snap on to operations management. There's also this product configurator. The product configurator is, you're familiar with bill options. It's sort of a more robust bill options. both operations management and production management have MFG 100, manufacturing 100 through Scanco that you can use. This is basically the same thing as the WO scan that you might be familiar with. So it's the replacement for that. If you're a field service user, there are some field service add-ons like field service dispatch and a tech dashboard. And then again, this is another shared feature between both operations and production management is multi-bin. Scanco has a multi-bin feature, and you can utilize that with either of these manufacturing modules. So I'm going to jump out of the PowerPoint here for just a second. I do want to show one of the new features, which is this inventory requirements planning. So this is the version that you would see if you were using production management. It's just called something different inside of operations management. It's the same set of features, same look and feel. So if you're familiar with MRP, MRP was this screen that you would enter in, you would hit this generate report, it would take 15-20 minutes to run, and then you'd get this big, huge detailed report that would basically tell you what to buy, what to make, and try to give you some details as to why it came up with that. What IRP and Component Exception Manager use is the same sort of concept where you do generate a work file with this. I'm going to clear this data out and I'm going to regenerate it. And instead of using a big, like 100-page report, it's got a purchase dashboard and a production dashboard. So what this is showing us here, these are the items from the data that we have. These are the items that it tells us we want to buy. If I click on one, if I said, for whatever reason, if I wanted to say, no, I don't want to buy it, I want to make it, you could say, move this to the production tab. If you are interested in just quantity on hand information, you've got some quick inventory drill downs. One of the neat features is this detail. This will actually tell you, what you start with from your on-hand inventory and why your quantity is going up or down. So for this item, I start out with 15. I'm gonna use 7 on this work ticket. I'm gonna use 9 on this work ticket. Oh, that puts me at -1. I need to purchase 1. So it does keep in mind if you have like reorder points and things like that, this 1 would get changed to like a 10 if your reorder point, like if your economic order quantity was 10, for instance, it would say 10 instead of 1. And so that's the same for each one. And then from here, the neat thing here, where the MRP module was just a sheet of paper, and then you would have to go over to the purchase order module and type everything in. Likewise, you would go to the work order module and type everything in. You can create purchase orders right from here. You could skip things, you could say hold. So if you weren't ready to do that, you certainly could, but you can create POs right from here. Similarly, we've got a production grid, almost identical, same thing. This is just going to create work tickets instead of purchase orders. So these are items that you build and not purchase. And it's got the same sort of drill down, capabilities of why did it come up with this number. A couple things. This is such a small list. You can filter by item code. So if you had tens of thousands of items, you don't necessarily have to have a grid that's like 10,000 lines long. You could filter by buyer code, planner code, warehouse code, item code, suffix, things like that. So with our last couple minutes here before we jump into questions, I want to talk about some key differences between the two. And Joe, if you want to chime in, by all means, you can chime in here. Key differences between production management, operation management. Production management is really cemented in make to stock. All the add-ons that you're going to see with operations management, they're not available yet. The production management's only been around for about a year, so it doesn't have all the add-ons and extra features that operations management does. The production management has both dynamic inventory and a fully full-fledged dynamic labor. It's only available for 2019 and above. Another caveat, so every single report that you see in production management is editable and maintainable through Crystal reports. Operations management is clearly makes to order. It's got a tight integration with the sales order. It does have all the add-ons, all the features that I mentioned are present in operations management. It has an auto inventory, but it doesn't really have that full-fledged auto labor that you see in production management. Since it's been around for so long, there's really no limit to what version that, as long as you're on a supported Sage version, you're going to be able to use, you would be able to purchase and use operations management with it. So 2017, 2018, for instance, if you're on those versions, you could use operations management without having to go through a conversion to 2019 or 2020 first. The one thing that you'll notice as you start running reports, not all the reports are Crystal reports. Some of them are sort of canned reports, which means that if you wanted to customize it, you would have to make your own specific Crystal report out of those instead. Production management, as its conversion to a full-fledged Sage module, they went through that conversion process. They're not all quite converted for operations management. So I think that sort of wraps it up from the overviews. I would say now is a good time for the Q&A, and we've got 5 or so minutes to.
Yeah, so there's a question here, Joe and Brett. An issue with one of the folks on the call is the way that Work Order, I guess, currently handles things with when an inventory, I guess it would be like a part, has a certain amount required on Work Order or required for Work Order. And the question is it would be nice to have a drill down capability to see which Work Order is requiring the item, so does production management have that feature?
Well,
yeah, go ahead, Joe.
It's in inventory maintenance. I saw that question come in, and I pulled it up real quick. So when you're in inventory maintenance and you see those bucketed numbers down bottom where it's like on SO, on PO, on work ticket, there's the required for work ticket bucket. And then when you go to the 6th tab, which is the orders tab, and that's where you typically in the past saw, work order, purchase order, sales order. There's now underneath work ticket, it'll show you all the work tickets that item is on, and there's a column for what is required and a column for what has already been issued. That required. So you have the ability. It's not really a drill down. It's just an additional screen you go to see that detail.
Which work orders it was, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Looks like there was a, let's see.
There was a question that came in as well about, is the inventory requirements planning part of production management? So
it is separate.
It is separate, yeah, but it works with either production management or operations management, but it's a separate module.
So just to correct you on, so that it is a separate module for production management. It's baked into operations management.
You're right.
It's called Component Exception Manager.
Correct.
Just to make sure people aren't confused.
Yep.
All right. Good. So looks like there's one more in here. If somebody wanted to convert to production management, they were on the traditional work order. Is there anything crazy about the conversion process? Looks like what the question is.
There is. So in starting in so they have some conversion tools that will bring some of that stuff forward. In 2020, they're going to have a more cleaner conversion wizard for that. But it's not a just install production management, click on a button, and you go live on it right away. It's a step-by-step, need to test things as you go process. So what will happen is, and it needs to be done on a separate environment than what the work order is currently running in. Because as soon as you install the production management module, even if it's not activated for a company, as soon as you install the operations management module on a version of Sage 100, work order no longer will function where you can process transactions. It all goes to inquiry or read-only screen.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So
Okay.
that's why you want to create a separate environment, and you copy your existing environment out there. You install production management on there. You do the migration of your information that it'll migrate for you. You do the manual changes to get everything ready to where you need to start doing your testing, and you just need to run a lot of transactions to make sure you have it the way you want.
Right. Yeah,
And
so it wouldn't be the traditional just install it and then test in a separate company. It has to be testing in a whole nother installation.
Installation, because
Right.
even if that module is not activated for a company, it still locks down the entire work order module for all companies out there if it's installed.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's all we had for the questions. So we'll guess thanks, Joe and Brett. It was very educational, and hope everybody got what they needed out of the
Hey, Rick, there's one
material.
more question.
Oh, sorry. I don't see that one.
Yeah.
Let me
Okay,
see.
it's does production management replace MRP? If so, does it have the same capabilities for ordering parts?
Well,
Yeah, so
go ahead,
the
Brett. You can take
production
that.
management itself doesn't. That's what the IRP. That was the module that I showed at the very, very end there. That piece replaces MRP, and you can use that dashboard to immediately create purchase orders right from that screen. Or even if it recommends, let's say you want to order 2, you could override that and say, well, no, I really want to order 10 or 50 or something like that.
All right. Does that look like it's it, Betsy? Guess I was looking in another spot there.
Yeah, that's all I see. as
Yes,
well.
that's all I see.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Well, thanks for everybody's time this afternoon. Like I said, we will be sending out follow-up emails and link to the recording. And if you have any questions, just contact your account manager here at Martin Associates. And everybody have a great day. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody,
Bye-bye.
for attending.
Yeah, thank you.